live from Houston, Texas. Welcome everyone to today's episode of What Makes You Tick. I'm really excited that you're here for number 32. That's crazy. 32 so far. Look, before we dive in, just a few housekeeping notes, and we want to create a great experience for everybody. And today, as always, I'll have an amazing guest. You will be interested to hear what this guy has to say. Look, this is an interactive live session. We encourage you to have questions, anything that you can drop in, just drop it to us. We'll have, if you got a question, you got any insight, please bring it to us. We'll listen to it, or we'll bring it on the show. We'll use LinkedIn DM in the comment section on the events posting for any behind the scenes coordination, which, I don't know if I can help you or not, but we'll try. I did last week. I actually helped somebody, as crazy as that sounds. If you get disconnected, just rejoin. Sometimes that happens. And we're also on YouTube, so that shouldn't be a problem. I haven't had any issues with YouTube. LinkedIn occasionally, but not very often. We know that you're either commuting, you're eating dinner with your family, you're sitting there, whatever you can do, even if you're listening to this on recording. Even quiet listeners are an important part of our community. Thanks for being here. Now let's get started. Today's guest is a global connector on different levels, on a different level. This kind of person does not just network, he moves markets. If you've ever wondered how someone gets a meeting with others and you can't even get a reply, you're about to meet the reason why the guy that you want to talk to. He opens doors most people don't even know exist, with an executive presence, precision, and purpose. He leverages an elite international network to connect organizations directly to C-suite leaders, HR executives, and key decision makers across US, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. From business development and executive engagement to corporate partnerships and strategic recruiting, this guy specializes in building high-impact alliances that drive growth and create sustainable pipelines. With a data-driven, scalable approach and a track record that includes Amazon, Microsoft, SpaceX, Google, and much more. My guest today helps organizations stay competitive, future-ready, and positioned for long-term success. Join me as we discover what makes Richard Castleberry tick. Richard, man, it's awesome to have you on. Give our listeners a little bit of what makes Richard tick.
Yeah. Thanks, Bryan. Well, I mean, what makes me tick is certainly, that kind of that the process. I would say, like, in my work, my day-to-day work of like just doing the outreach, knocking on the doors, and what makes me tick is the response that I get when I get that response. And sometimes, I got to tell you, it's not always easy, of course. Mm-hmm. There's times when you have to knock on that door a number of times. You've got to get really creative. You might need to leverage other connections to get that door open and such. But for me, what makes me tick, Bryan, is when, I've reached that success, right? Getting the meeting. And then obviously, of course, then it's, bringing the right parties together and, hoping that it all goes well. But I mean, most of the time, of course, it does. But that's only because, I've kind of done the homework on the front end, right? Making sure that the people I'm representing are top notch. Because bottom line, Bryan, you better bring value. If you don't bring value, good luck.
We had that conversation today. I've got people that are doing business development, and everybody knows that listens to this that I'm teaching. We're looking at some of our softball, and that's one of our questions is, hey, where do you bring value? Because that's the big thing. You have to find a way. But you and I were talking before this, and you were talking about value. And the funny thing is, in our conversation, in our prep, I can tell, and I've already heard this before because you and I have known each other for a couple of years now. You have that ability, like where you stand. That's huge. Most people don't know who they are or what their strengths are. You do. How did you get? First of all, I've got so many questions. How did you get to the position of where you are? Because it's very unique.
Yeah, and honestly, frankly speaking, that's going to be a great segue into the second part of what you were looking at. So I'll try to give you a very high level, like kind of where everything started. I grew up an Air Force brat. Living kind of living all over the world. So that kind of opened my horizons, so to speak. And it allowed me to just kind of get to really just kind of force myself to kind of be open and meeting new people, meeting new cultures. I mean, I got to be honest, most of the time I feel like like international people I kind of resonate a bit more with than even Americans having lived abroad for so long. But that's kind of like where everything started, I believe, was I was, I did my MBA in California, and right after my MBA, during my MBA, I had a faculty member, a marketing faculty member that really made an impression on me. And it actually all started there, where this was literally at the advent of the internet. So the internet just had kind of started up, and made a real impression on me. And I thought to myself, I had always wanted to live in Europe. And, he got me thinking, wow, wouldn't it be cool to teach business? Because again, he made that impression on me to want to do that, but in Europe. I literally started looking at, like, okay, who can I, where would allow me to teach in English, but over in Europe, as an example, business. Of course, then just leverage, because I didn't have a PhD or anything. So it would have had to have been something like, kind of a lecture type scenario. But I ended up finding a university in Zagreb, Croatia.
Wow.
Where I was able to start off by teaching like business in English in cooperation with a Croatian professor. So that's kind of where it all started. And then one thing led to another. I ended up getting an offer to go do it for the Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT. Their affiliated campus in both Dubrovnik, Croatia, and Pristina, Kosovo.
Wow.
And I ended up living in Kosovo for 7 years, met my wife, and, ended up, having a few kids there. And then an incredible opportunity came for me to go work at the main university that had sort of just started recent in Kazakhstan. And so why I'm telling you all this is because it was really over the course of, in particular, my time in Kazakhstan, where I really started to really build an incredible network. And it was largely due to what I was doing. So I was really responsible for business development for academic programs. However, it also entailed me being like responsible for the executive MBA and those programs. So if you're going to recruit people for an executive MBA program, guess who those people are going to be? They're going to be the top people, right? They're going to be the CEO, or not necessarily the CEOs, but C-suite, the high potentials and people like that. So I started to really build my network. After 6.5 years in Kazakhstan, you start to, just because, the kids start to get older, you start having those conversations with your wife, like, okay, what are we going to do? We really kind of need to settle somewhere. So I decided to look with, with what she was saying to the US. And I had gotten an incredible opportunity that was offered to me by the dean of Mays Business School at the time, Dr. Eli Jones, fantastic guy. He and the associate dean, Arvind Mahajan, offered me to come and be the director of the full-time MBA and MS business programs at Texas A&M. Now you're talking the largest public university, I think, in the U.S. for enrollment. I mean,
and you were with A&M when we met. Yeah.
And so did that, and you'll understand why I'm telling you the story here in a minute. But did that for almost 4.5 years, and then I was offered the role of director of corporate relations for the business school. So as you can imagine, when you are asked to basically create and build the relationships, partnerships with literally, I was asked to do with the largest companies. So the Amazons, the Googles, Microsofts, et cetera. Keeping in mind, though, that of course, still you've got students across the board that have different desires, so what it allowed me to do, I had to basically build relationships across all industries.
Wow.
So that is really how I got to where I'm at now. So last summer 2024, I decided it's time for me to do my own thing. You get those questions, right, Brian? You get those questions in your head. We were talking about it. Kind of like, is this really what I'm going to do the rest of my life? And I had always wanted to kind of do my own thing. And so I got to tell you, though, I'm really only able to do really what I'm doing because of that network that I was able to build over time. And so now what I'm doing is I'm helping CEOs, owners of businesses, and in some cases, even top organizations I'm helping them with their business development. Sometimes it's day to day. And sometimes it's like it's ongoing, but it's not every day. It's like kind of like throughout the week, but it's not every day. So I am doing this fractionally for a number of top clients.
Right. No, and that's, look, we looked, when I was looking back and looking for guests and I reached out to you, I was like, oh man, Richard and I haven't talked in a while. So, and he would be a great engaging because of your network and because of the conversations that we've had. You know, I've been impressed. Business development guy, love what you do. But my question is a unique question. How did you get so big? How long did it take you to build that network? Because on LinkedIn, you've got like 32,000.
Well, and here's the thing, just to let you know, I had 30,000. 30,000 is the limit.
Yeah.
For connections on LinkedIn.
Okay.
You can have
I didn't know that.
Well, it's the amount of connections that they'll allow you. They'll allow you to have more followers. So I've got like almost 33,000 followers. But here's the thing. I had 30,000 connections maybe about 8 years ago now.
Yeah. Wow.
And so in order for me to add new people to my LinkedIn as a connection, I have to remove other people.
Wow.
It's awful, to be honest with you, but it's the way it is. So what I guess what getting to what you were saying, initially when I was over in Kazakhstan, I really wanted to build my network as quick as I could. And right. I went with the mindset, because what I was doing, I was trying to promote like events at the business school. I was trying to do a lot of promotion. And so having actually taught marketing in the past, as a faculty member, I have always been a big believer in, it's not just, who it's who knows you.
Yeah.
And so I believed that like, hey, if I can connect with as many people as I can and put the word out about the events, about what, all the special things we're doing at the business school, right, then guess what? More and more people are going to be aware, and they can make, certain decisions based on that. And so that was kind of my mindset. So that's really what helped me explode it. Wow. And then, of course, since then, the real meaningful connections, most of that has happened through, of course, as you can imagine, right? The one-on-one connections that you make. That has been a result of, just the more than just basically like sending out a LinkedIn, hey, let's connect, right?
Yeah.
Much more about where could we do things together.
Dude, that piece right there. I mean, I know you've got a big network and you've got to have your network for what you want to do and your goals. Love that. But what you just said, like I tell people this all the time, where I'm doing right now, and I'm in education, so I'm teaching right now, and I'm having to go back. But what you just said, I miss that one-on-one piece. I miss that development of people and getting to like asking. This right here, this medium that I have, I love it because it gives me that energy to be able to feel that and be able to have that connection. That's why you're on. That's why I have the guests on that are interactive, because I want to bring positive energy to what they do. And I miss that. Like that one-on-one is huge in what people do. Now,
and that's how you build. I mean, this is about, right? Yeah. This is one of the caveats about this whole, show you've got is about trust, right?
Right.
Well, what better way to build trust than when you have that personal relationship with someone?
You have to. I had a friend of mine ask me, how do you get these guests on? I said, look, most of them I just know. And then I have people that we've met. And it's really about building trust, because when you've got somebody that you trust and you're trustworthy, people will build. I do want to switch just a little bit. Because trust, we're talking about trust. AI is a big topic right now. And I know that you're seeing some of that within your businesses. And I know it's got to have some issue with trust. What are you seeing as far as trust and the interaction of AI?
Yeah, well, so, what I would say in that area is, and again, a little bit of it's going to highly depend on what it is, the AI that it is you're in a sense as a
how you're using it, what you're doing it for, all that.
And as a business, right? Yeah. If I'm like doing the BD on something like that, or I'm just talking to a potential client about it, the trust factor becomes a bigger issue when there's more at stake for the potential customer, right? So I'll give you an example. I'm currently working with a new client, and their particular, let's say business is, it's one of those ones where the customers really have to trust you.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, right, all of your data in a sense is in their hands, right, as well. And this is actually it's actually an interesting question, because I've also recently talked with a company potentially about working with them, and what they're looking to do, what they're basically their business is switching from cloud to actually where it's more like, because obviously with the cloud, and if we talk about data centers and building data centers, of course, the requirement is for huge amounts of energy, right? To run those data centers.
Yes.
Well, they've come up with some sort of technology that takes it away from the cloud and makes it more like right there on your premises. And I always forget what you know, someone out there can take the words out of my mouth, but it's where they drop the, you know, units into that liquid. And it helps.
I know what you're talking about, but I'm a biology guy. Come on, I can't
think of the term, but I know what you're talking about. They're screaming it right now.
Yeah.
And anyways, and so, you know, when you're talking about, you know, having that, like that sort of access to a company's data and all of their, in some cases, right, their secrets or their secret sauce on, you know, what they do and all of that, their competitive advantage, it becomes really, you know, very tricky.
Yeah.
And that's where there really has to be, a trust between the, you know, the customer and of course the company.
No, and I think that's a big question that I've never necessarily thought of. It's been on a tip of my head, but I've never really thought about it. Is whenever you go, a lot of the stuff you can do with AI, and you and I were talking earlier about time. AI can, if you learn it, it can help you manage time. It can give you time back to where your employees or your business development people can actually do business development and not do the tedious work of writing stuff down. Calls, you can free people up to do a lot of different things. But if you want to use some of the data, you can use customer data to be able to predict trends, to predict needs they may have before they know they need them. There's a lot of things that AI can do to help you grow, but there's a trust factor there, because do I really, when I put it out there and I put it into this bot, where is my data going?
Oh yeah.
And who else has access to it?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. That's what I was getting at. And you're right. I mean, and I got to tell you, even in my business, right, I'm constantly thinking about, like, you know, what processes can I maybe, you know, utilize AI or, you know, at some point I may need to hire somebody to do some of that, you know, because, you know, where my value's added is when I'm doing the high touch, right, points.
Yes.
You know, whoever those top people are that I'm trying to connect with and set meetings with, that's where my value is added. It's not added when I'm having to spend time putting, you know, information into a Google Doc.
Right. Gosh, I did some of that today. I went, you're sitting there doing this stuff, and you sit there. If you, like me, you sit at a computer and you can do the work, but there's a certain point where you reach out and you start going, I need to get out. I need to see people. Yeah,
for sure. I try to mix a little bit of that in. This morning I was at a meeting with Bechtel, you know, in Houston, the oil and gas company, you know, and so I had a meeting, you know, in-person meeting. I got to tell you, and it was actually quite funny too, because the one of the key people that I was supposed to meet with ended up having to work from home. So I went to his office, in a sense. I was sitting there in his office, technically in his office, but in his headquarters, having a meeting with him virtually, which I could have obviously done from home. So it was pretty funny, but, you know, and then of course I live in the Woodlands, so it's about a 50-minute drive for me to go do that.
Yeah, you're not very far from me, because we both live in the Woodlands, so, which is phenomenal. If you haven't been to the Woodlands, it's a phenomenal place. It's full of phenomenal people, and you can get just about any kind of food that you want. If you want to drink, go have a drink. If you want to go out for the night, you can. And you're not in Houston. Yeah. There's actually woods. Like, you can drive by, and you know this, real quick, a little twist. When you drive here, you go for a restaurant, you have to sometimes have your GPS, because you can't see it because it's behind the trees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remember those first weeks, like weekends here, trying to like learn, hey, what's this Woodlands place about? And like, Yeah, you'll be driving down a main road and there's a McDonald's, there's a gas station.
Yes.
You don't see any of it. You just
No.
see this little sign near the road saying, you got to go in here, and then behind all the trees, there's the McDonald's or there's the, the gas station.
I do.
I gotta tell you, I tell people all the time, Brian, if I have to live in the US, right? Having lived abroad and having, had lots of fun outside the US, I always say if I have to live in the US, I want it to be in the woodlands because it's a special place.
No, it's great. Look, we're almost to the reset part. Before we get to the reset part, we always talk about books. And I know one of the things I want to change it up a little bit here. For me, I've gotten really big into growth books lately. Some AI, some positive mindsets, crucial conversations. I want to be able to grow. Whereas my reading, and I tell people this all the time, I'm from South Louisiana. I read extremely slow, but I like the positive mindset books, something that's going to lift me up because I'm surrounded in an environment in what I do right now that can be very, very negative. And it helps me to understand, one, what's really good. And two, it helps me to bring that positive energy in a negative situation. It keeps my mind peaceful. Not only that, and maybe a couple drinks here and there does also help, but just a nice book that helps me see things from a different perspective and change that positive mindset. And I know, like you and I were talking, you've got some really unique books. What kind of stuff do you like to read?
Yeah, I would say, like, in general, if I'm reading a book, it tends to be more like, just having lived abroad for so long, I really like, books about just kind of different cultures and such. Give you an example. When I lived in Kazakhstan, I was really intrigued on, the making of Kazakhstan because, of course, having went from, Soviet Union days to like really building something that, is very much on the map now, right? And obviously there's a lot of probably painful change as well. That's all part of that. But to see it go from that to, where it's at today. But as well, I'd say probably, as a result just of time, right? I do like to read in kind of more like sort of short digestible chunks.
Yeah, same. Yes.
And probably maybe even more than books specifically, I enjoy reading like just online, like, stories about, maybe new management techniques or new, things that I may be able to use in my everyday life. I really like that, like being able to take nuggets and say, hey, this is something I think, I should really kind of, focus on or do. So, hey, once in a while, if you hear something good or you see something good or you read about something good, you can take it and, try to see if you can bring it into your own life.
No, I love that. Okay. So you got plenty of time to choose. If you had to choose, would you be 1, an online reader, 2, a book in front of you, or 3, a listener? Which one would you choose?
So I love the romanticism of like having a physical book in front of me.
Yeah.
With that being said, due to my time, I would probably choose your route, Brian. I would probably like listen to it and, just kind of, sort of zone out, because I do find myself, in my car sometimes. I used to do this so like, remember when I was working at A&M, I was almost the entire time I was working at A&M, I was commuting from the Woodlands. Mm-hmm. So you have it was about an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes door to door. Great. And of course, very chill commute too. It's not like you're going to Houston. Yeah. So it was a great time to do that, kind of like you could, listen to a book or listen to a podcast or whatever it might be. So probably if I chose, it would probably be that, but only for that reason, just time. I find it to be a bit, just easier, and I can try to do, I'm a multitasker, so I can try to do other things while I'm doing it as well.
Man, my daughter, and I know plenty of other people that will sit down and read a book, and I look at the book, go, okay, yeah, you've got about 2 months of that, and they're done within 2 weeks. I'm like, what the heck? I just want to go, yes, because I can't do that. I'm a listener.
It's probably like Dostoevsky or something as well.
Oh my gosh, no. Look, today's my 30-second podcast. What Makes You Tick is an authentic, purposeful conversation about trust, clarity, and traction. Why? We help incorporate purpose in what you do and impact your life and the life of others. How do we do that? By sharing business stories, personal stories, building culture of trust, creating clear, impactful messages as a leader with the insight on how to build traction within your life. My guest today, we're having a great conversation with Richard Castleberry, the world traveler. We've talked before, but I didn't realize you had been to so many different places, man. That's amazing.
Well, I was honestly, I was really blessed because when I was in my role in Kazakhstan, because as head of business development for academic programs, like in the fall and in the spring, I was almost in a different country every week. But usually what was great about it was I was still able to be with my family because I would like, for example, I might go, I was obviously based in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. But I would go, for example, I might go to like Vietnam and be there for like 3 days, back to Kazakhstan. The next week I might be in, Azerbaijan, right? Baku or someplace like that, or Russia. So I was always able to like still kind of, have a good family life too. But I was traveling a lot because I was representing, the main university there, Nazarbayev University, and I was promoting all of its programs and really trying to, promote really in some ways, promote Kazakhstan as a place to go and be an international student. So that's, what I was doing. So it really allowed me to really be able to just meet a lot of people and see a lot of things.
How do you stay in contact with them?
Always. So I'll just tell you quickly. So I told you a little bit about my business already.
Yeah.
Probably about 90% of my business is what I was referring to earlier, right? The business development with top, CEOs, owners of companies, and I'm very, very committed to that. However, I still have about maybe about 10% of my business is actually more on the global scene. Even though some of my 90% is also like still in Kazakhstan and other places as well. But the 10% that I'm referring to tends to be more on the investment or big ideas kind of scene. So let's say, for example, I'm talking with somebody like a CEO of a business in Qatar.
Okay.
And they may be looking to invest in, like, hypothetically, like solar or something like that. I will leverage my network to try to match the people with the money and the people with the projects, or vice versa.
Got it.
So I still do some of that as well. So I'm actually like quite regularly in touch with people abroad. And I'll just leave it with one other thing I should mention too. So, obviously that I live in the woodlands.
Yeah.
But actually I really only live in the woodlands now about 10 months of the year. The other 2 months of the year, I'm living in Kosovo and Albania in the summer. So my wife is Albanian from Kosovo. So we live there in the summer, and I do all my work from there. I have my laptop and I'm doing just like I would be as if I was here in Texas.
Well, okay. So that brings me to like my thought, listening to you and what you're talking about. Normally I have a different interaction of AI here, but I want to go back a little bit and I'll come back to the AI piece. So first, what are you seeing? What's the difference in technology? Is it the same technology when you go from country to country? What do you see out there?
Yeah, so for the most part, it definitely is. It's like when I go there, I can pretty much do everything I would ever do if I was here. However, what's interesting about a place like Kosovo is that the population is extremely young.
Yes.
Very, very bright youth, and they're very tech savvy. So what's interesting is you probably are familiar with some parts of Eastern Europe, places like Poland, other places where they at once upon a time were, let's say, the less expensive alternative for outsourcing and things like that, for tech work and for software development, things like that.
Right.
Well, now,
that's where I was going.
Now it's Kosovo that's like places like that are doing that. And so companies, for example, here in the US and Europe and other places in Europe are using, the Kosovars to do a lot of like this software development and other types of tech stuff. So it's incredible, how fast, things are going in places like that.
What about AI? So what are you seeing do you see that in Kosovo and surrounding area like you do in US?
Absolutely, you do. You definitely do, and including in Kazakhstan as well. So what you'll find is the startup communities in these places are just like, it's unbelievable. And maybe part of it is also certainly education and how important education is in those places, right? But also it may also in some ways come out of necessity.
Yeah.
Because obviously, you probably in with some of the bigger companies, maybe let's say there's not as many opportunities and jobs and such. So what I think you find is very ambitious young people that start their own businesses, start their own companies. Mm-hmm. And because they're so ambitious and they're willing to put the time in and the work, and they're bright, they're able to actually start, companies, in AI and a lot of new sort of technology space and try to get, it's a bit more challenging for them to, of course, get foreign investment, into those businesses.
Right.
But nonetheless, they find ways to capitalize their companies.
Wow. And do they get any money from the U.S. or do they look for investment from the U.S.?
They do. They definitely do. But as I was saying, it is, of course, a bit more challenging for them because getting back actually to the trust issue, right?
Yeah. Okay.
There's sometimes there's just this, there's these false, let's say ideas of what it's like in certain places.
Right.
And unless or you've got, for example, somebody like myself who's international who says, hey, this is the real deal. You really need to look at this. Mm-hmm. Without having somebody that, can vouch and stuff, sometimes, of course, it's more challenging for them to get, let's say, American investors to invest in that because it's, they just don't know and they're not sure. And can they trust their investment and things along those lines?
Yeah. Okay. So you have gone back and forth and you've had these conversations with them for many, many years and you've seen it. And I can imagine you run into people where you're an expert in a certain area, especially in a different country. How do you, as an expert, how do you communicate that? Or if I'm asking you and you're going to give me advice, how would you tell me to communicate that expertise to a group of people that aren't, or maybe not even speak complete English?
So I had a couple things. I will be honest. I had a couple sort of things going for me that probably the average person wouldn't. Uh-huh. So here's what those are. One is, remember why I went to Kosovo in the first place. I was faculty there. I was teaching there.
Right.
So I met so many people while I was, what they called, a professor, right? I was teaching at this university there for 7 years. Mm-hmm. So of course, naturally, you're going to meet a lot of young people. You're going to teach them marketing and some other classes, but as well, while you're there, you're also, of course, you're building your network outside the university as well. So for me, I kind of already had a bit they knew me, they know who I am. And, and the English is very strong there.
Really? I didn't know that.
Very strong in Kosovo. And I think a lot of that had to do with, the conflict, the war. And then of course, a lot of a lot of foreign troops, international troops were there. So the need for really good English and learning English was for many years now. Kazakhstan, quite strong as well in English, although it tends to be a bit more the younger population with the strong English. Because remember they also have Russian and Kazakh. So it's 3 languages, which is, that becomes a bit more challenging for anybody, right? To learn 3. But anyway, so what I would say again, a lot of it is personal relationships. And so when I will tell you, because this was my first trip back as my own business, right? Having my own company. I wasn't, still at A&M. So when I went there this last time around, which was this summer, and I started talking with CEOs and owners of companies to talk about how I might work with them, I was sharing, my insights on, how they could, try to make what is a successful business there successful in the US, right?
Yeah, which absolutely.
That's what they all want, right? They all want to take what they've got going there and try to build something in the US. I mean, that's what, so it's just about sharing your expertise and, and talking with them and trying to give them good guidance.
Okay, so let's go into that expertise piece and trying to. So they have, I'm guessing that their values and their beliefs are different from us.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a business standpoint, not that much different.
But just their culture.
Yeah, culture for sure. Culture for sure.
How does that translate? Are they able to utilize any of that to help them translate to the U.S. or help them translate to a U.S. company that they can connect with?
Yeah, I think with certainly with Kosovo, the majority of the youth, again, they're just very good English. They've been exposed a lot because now with tech, I mean, I got to be honest with you. Probably if you were to ask me this question 20 years ago, it might be a very different answer.
Correct.
But because of technology, they're so in the loop with what's happening, what's going on, what's the, where they should, be, what they should be doing. They obviously are seeing what's successful, what's not successful. So, I mean, in some ways, the learning curve has just been flattened significantly because, I'm going to go in there and I'm not really going to tell them a lot that they don't already know about that perspective. For me, it's much more the tactical and of course the relationships, right? Which there's no substitute for the relationships.
No, and that's huge because personally, if you're going to have, you have somebody with different values and somebody with different beliefs, whether it's business wise, personal wise, culture wise, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to build that trust. And that personal relationship that you have to build to be able to create that trust is extremely important. Is it different here doing that? Like, do you find yourself doing different things in Kosovo or in the area of Europe as you do here, or is it the same? Do you basically, are you being the same person, I guess?
For the most part, I would say yes. But it works favorably for me where it might not necessarily work favorably for them. And here's the reason is because, again, it's kind of like and I have this conversation a lot with my Kazakh friends. Mm-hmm. So, it's one thing for, let's say, for example, for a Kazakh person to say, hey, we're a Kazakh company and we're really, cutting edge and we're really top notch. And what you learned on a really bad movie from, some years ago, that's not true, right?
Yeah.
So, that's one thing. But again, if it's me, for example, being the international guy, and I'm saying, guys, I've lived there for 6.5 years.
Correct. You have credibility.
How top notch they are.
Yeah.
It's very different. So this is honestly, if I think about friends I've got both in Kazakhstan and in Kosovo, this is, if they want to work with me, it's largely going to be for that reason. My ability, because of again, my relationships and how much easier it's going to be for me to say, hey, you need to take a look at this Kosovar company, than it will be for them to do that.
Right.
Whereas if I go there, they're probably going to be more open to me because it's ironic, but because I'm a Westerner and, and so it's funny how it's almost like, kind of a catch-22, right? How that works. But yeah, that's often how it does work. At least in the cultures I'm talking about. Probably not always going to be the case. I mean, you might find, for example, and I've done a lot of traveling throughout China and places like that. In China, for example, it may be a bit different, right? Where they might be a bit more like, well, you're, coming from America, we really don't like to work with, you just, and I think even drawing generalizations like that can be harmful as well, because there's exceptions.
And it's funny because I find here based on what you're saying, I'm hearing you still have to build trust similarly in the U.S. as you would anywhere you go.
For sure.
But is it harder in certain countries, regardless of who you are? But is it harder to build that trust? Because we do one-on-ones. You have to be trustworthy. And honestly, there's a lot of things in the U.S. that we trust blindly and without even really. Is it harder? Do you find that there are people all over in your travels that do the same thing? Or is there certain cultures where you really have to dig in to be able to build that trust or to gather that trust?
Yeah, I mean, so look, I growing up, I lived in Japan for 3 years. And Japan is actually very well known for wanting to build a relationship first before you start talking about business and all of that, right? Do the golf thing, do whatever. I mean, naturally, especially in international business in general, right? You can't like just do a blanket like, hey, and this is how it's done abroad. Because, Germany is going to be very different than Japan, which may be very different than, other places like Kazakhstan, for example, right? Some are extremely hierarchical, and so ironic,
right.
but it may be here's a funny thing. Like when I lived in Kazakhstan, for example, it was often much easier for me to get a meeting with a top Kazakh at a national company than it was for a Kazakh person to do that, because there were all sorts of formalities and still even with some, like in some cases with the Americans, of course I had to do an official letter. I mean, it was just the way it was, right?
Wow.
So, but getting back to the trust part, I do think that there are cultures where you really have to build that trust first before they're going to be willing to sit down and really truly want to do business with you, because they want to know you. They want to believe that, you're someone of, integrity and all of that. So I do think that there's very much that is the case in some places.
And are they the same way personally? I mean, business-wise, yes, but what about personally? Are they the same way?
I want to tell you a fun fact about that question. So one of the things, I think I always surprised a lot of my Kazakh friends was my desire, and you have to be careful with this. You got to use good judgment. But one of the things I like to do in all of my communications with top people is, as soon as I'm able to, I like to actually make it as informal as I can.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's a lot of different ways in which you can do that. Certainly, again, this has to be done prudently. You just can't do it like, willy-nilly. But as an example, it would be very common for me to just to call you by your first name. Hey, Bryan, how's everything? And I like to, like, as early as I can or as quick as I can, I like to start talking about family, what you do, make it as informal as possible. And the reason for that is I've always felt like the more informal and friendly you can make it, the quicker the relationship's going to kind of grow.
Agreed.
And trust is going to start being built and all of that. But again, there's, you have to kind of look at the room, right? Read the room, so to speak, because in some instances, there does need to be that formality, and make sure that the other individual knows that you respect them and such as well. So it's a fine balancing act, but I got to tell you, a lot of times, I always tried to, as quickly as I could when I was having a lunch or something, a meeting with, let's say, a top Kazakh, which a lot of my Kazakh friends would be in shock that I was talking to them about, barbecues and things like that. But it was largely for that reason. I just, I kind of, want, but it was genuine. That was just me.
Yeah.
I was wanting to know about their family, and I always, of course, shared about myself and such as well. So, and that's often too, people tend to open up if you open up as well. I think there's a lot going on with that too.
See, and that's important. I mean, being able to communicate what you want and being able to be real, like that to me creates, and I'll be honest with you, it took me a while, because I was not a while, but it took me a little bit of my life to understand it's not about the expectations of others. It's about your own expectations and being yourself. And when you can put down your walls and be yourself, like I had a lady ask me, one of my softball girls today asked me, Coach Hill, are you married? I went, no. She goes, oh, I said, as I was at one point, she goes, oh, I'm sorry I asked. I said, no, just to ask. I mean, that's me being real, because you might have a question. You might be going through something. You might be able to connect in a way that you normally wouldn't. So those types of conversations and being real are big. We're going to have to take we're going to do a reset here in a minute. But before we go to reset, I want to ask you one quick question. The Texans or the Steelers?
You're asking the wrong person that question. Because I think I told you earlier, I am a diehard Boston everything fan.
Yes, we talked about that.
So whoever wins tonight goes to
New England.
Foxborough. They'll be playing my New England Patriots. So I think even though Houston is favored in this game,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people out there that think Pittsburgh's going to win because it's a home game and you got Aaron Rodgers and all this stuff. I actually think Houston's going to win, but then they're going to lose next week against my Patriots.
No, look, okay. I will say this. I'll share this. We didn't talk about this earlier, but when I first moved here and started coaching, I coached at the Woodlands High School. My 7th grade group had Danny Amendola. So you know who Danny Amendola is.
Of course I know who Amendola is.
Yeah, so I followed. It's the Woodlands' own Danny Amendola. He's a phenomenal kid, man. I loved his kid, loved his parents, and all of that class was like, for me to come in and coach them in 7th grade was a privilege for me.
It's amazing.
And I'm looking at my phone the other day, and I just happened to look down at Facebook, and I see him sitting in the locker room with Tom Brady and Gronk and Edelman, and they're sitting around. I'm like, wow, that's so awesome.
Cool. That is awesome. My son plays for the Woodlands High School football. That's cool.
Is he what position?
He's wide receiver.
Dude, the second year I coached here, before they split and started building out schools, we had a morning practice and an afternoon practice. They moved me. I was helping offensive line. They moved me to wide receivers to help in the afternoon, because we had 327 kids total, 7th grade only. We had 100 at one point. We had 120 receivers just in the afternoon practice.
My heavens, that is crazy.
You talk about being creative. You talk about being creative and how to get as many maximized drills. Oh my gosh, it was hilarious. Look, thank you guys for listening to my podcast, What Makes You Tick. Richard and I are having an authentic, purposeful conversation on trust, clarity, and traction. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. So far, we don't have any, Richard, but this is still a great conversation. Anything in the discussion so far that you want to give a takeaway to the audience?
No, I mean, I get asked a lot about networking. I mean, that's kind of really my thing.
Yeah.
And how to build a good network, and about relationships and everything. And what I've talked about really to this point is the importance of leveraging your network. But what I haven't really talked about at all has been the maybe as equally important connecting with new people. And so what I mean by that is I of course on a daily basis I'm leveraging my network in my work. Yeah. However, also on a daily basis, I am hunting for new connections for my work as well. And of course, again, everything again is not, it's not about transactional. It's about trying to truly build something. Yeah. So when I'm doing that, when I'm reaching out to new people to try to set those meetings up that I really need for my clients, it's very much about where, again, my clients can add value to them. And so as you start to think about building your network for whatever it is you want to do, it's not just about leveraging the people but it's very much also about connecting with the right people that maybe, you need to know or you should know for what it is you want to do. So I find what I'm telling you now is what I'm doing literally on a daily basis.
Wow. I mean,
that's also really important.
So get a tip. How would, if I'm looking to leverage that network, or not leverage the network, but build my network, what would I do? What would you tell me to do? So
it's completely going to be up to like what it is you're trying to do, right? So I'll give you an example. One of my clients, they specifically do customized executive education. So of course, naturally doing what I did at A&M, I know a ton of learning and development leaders, right? Learning and development leaders, HR directors, CHROs, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the people I typically want to connect with at the Fortune 500 companies for this particular client, as an example. So many cases, I can just reach out to, a dozen or more contacts at a particular company and say, hey, look, I really need to connect with, somebody in your L&D. Can you help, introduce me, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes, of course, you may not hear back. It may take a while. So you try to reach out to somebody else. So what I would say is in a case like that, I'm using either AI to say, hey, who's right? Who's doing L&D at, Baker Hughes now, as an example. Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out who it is. Then I'm going to LinkedIn and I'm, sending out again, very purposeful invitations to try to get them to connect with me. And then once, because you only got 300 characters, right?
So you do send it. That's what was my question. So you do send a personalized.
Oh yeah,
message.
everything's personalized.
Yeah, see, I love that.
If it's B2B, it has to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Never ever just try to connect. It has to be personalized. So personalized, it's very specific to my client and to how I can add value. Remember, we're not talking about connecting to some average person. We're connecting to like important people at that organization. They're only going to respond, and that's a maybe, if you can bring value to them. So I have to make sure that in my 300 characters, want to connect with me. And then once they connect with me, I can write a little bit longer message outlining all the different things that we can do for them. And let's meet for 30 minutes or whatever, you get creative, right, with what that message is. But that's the way in which I go about it. But again, that's going to differ from, from one group to the next, or one company to the next, or whatever. But that's generally how I go about it.
No, I love like the AI piece was one of the things that was on my mind, and I love that you integrated, because what I'm finding with businesses, with the kids that I'm around with, like you talk about anything from youth to old, you can make a connection. Like we've already said, I love the personalized piece, but what I'm finding with AI and my lack of writing skills, I can put AI into or give it a prompt. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm going to do, and have a conversation with it and create a message. But once I copy and paste that message, it doesn't go out just like that. It has to be, for me, because I want it to say something about you. It just happens to say it better. So I have to go in and make tweaks. And I don't like that. But AI creates that time where I would sit at a computer agonizing on how to get it out and type. I can type decent, but it's the thought process getting it out there. Just that's not the way I'm wired. This AI has cut down that time. But the funny thing is, I'm starting to be able to learn and have conversations with people that are changing because it's teaching me.
And then here's another way in which I'm using it almost on a daily basis as well. And I love it. One of my other clients, they do like technical recruiting. Yeah. And one day we were going through a couple of kind of high level companies that we really wanted to connect with. And I said, well, this is great, but hey, let's, use AI to see who are those companies' main competitors. And then all of a sudden, you got a whole new group, and you can obviously put it in an Excel spreadsheet, throw it into a Google Doc, and you're saving yourself a whole lot of time. And now you've got actually a hit list that you're going to go after. Boom, hey, let's go after these 20 LNG companies or midstream companies or whatever they might be, So
and you can create a prompt even after that to go dig deeper. What is their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And be able to find out, where can we compete? Is this a company we can compete with? Is this a company that we can beat? Where's their weaknesses? It's just like a football game or creating a sports. You can be able to create a game plan.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I love that. Okay, so you obviously, just in our conversations, you've obviously found your dream and your dream job, and because you've got your own business. And if I'm young, or even at my age, because I'm looking at the next step, what advice would you give me to chase my dreams? Or to somebody that's a kid, what would you give them to chase their dreams?
Yeah, well, of course, that's very difficult to give a cookie cutter answer to that, because people have all sorts of different types of dreams. But, one thing I will say, at least in my world, there is no shortcuts. For me, there's absolutely no substitute for door knocking and knocking on doors and reaching out and being persistent and continual follow-up, and just going at it that way. Because I got to tell you, how many times, man, I've reached out to someone hypothetically 5-6 times, and of course I'm very careful, how much time in between, and, mixing up the message, and, using all sorts of creative methods. But I got to tell you, it could be that 6th or 7th time when they reach back to you and say, oh my God, Richard, I'm so sorry. I've been going through whatever. Mm-hmm. And then, because you've been so kind and you've really, tried to, you've shown how much you really want to work with them, they, offer you that meeting that has been so elusive. And let me tell you, I've got insane examples of that. But it's about that. So I would say, getting back specifically to your question, if there is something that, for example, that you really want to do, you truly do need to just kind of go for it. You need to figure out ways in which I would say, of course it's going to differ a little bit too, like depending on, your situation, your family situation, your life situation.
Yes.
It was a bit more difficult for me, having 3 kids, I have a house, all these things. And all of a sudden I'm leaving, a sure thing. And so you have to think about, those kinds of considerations. But I got to tell you, if there's ways in which you can even like ease your way into it, it's possible. But the point is at some point you probably will have to just kind of go for it.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, and I got to tell you, yes, it's awesome being on my own. But at the same time, if I'm not like that self-starter and I know what I got to do and I got to do it. And there's times when, obviously Saturdays, Sundays, I'm with my laptop, my little guy's playing at the playground or whatever. And I'm working on my laptop. I'm doing stuff, watching him and having fun too. But, this is the commitment, but it's really nice when you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah, you have to be able to be committed whenever you start your own business or when you go into a company and you're chasing that dream. Be committed and go, because even if you miss a lot of times, that miss is there to teach you something, number one, that may help you, number two, get to where you actually should be, and that dream can come alive to whatever you're looking for.
And how cool is it when you kind of kill it, right? You crush it with your client. I mean, that is just awesome.
Look,
I love that feeling.
This show is about trust and clarity. And I will tell you, when I worked at Gordon Foods, look, I loved the company. I loved what they stood for. And we had to do a lot of the same things when we were doing business development. You had to go in and you just walked in, you kind of mapped it out, walked in, and you had to have multiple conversations, multiple turn downs. But there might be that one day that you walk in and you have that conversation with the guy that he just had a bad experience with his supplier. That opens a door. But I will tell you, because you live up here, there are two, you talk about building trust and getting an account and doing it legitimately, authentically. Darren McKenzie over at McKenzie's Barbecue was one that I called on, and Gordon ends up getting his account. It wasn't because I was the best rep and we were the best. It was because I truly loved their family. Like I loved what they did. I loved what he stood for, and it matched what we did. And it was a great conversation. By the way, if you haven't been there, you need to go. And then over here, one of my favorite, and you're around the Woodlands, Eden Cafe, is, I think, they just changed the name. I think Ulysses and Maria are phenomenal. They are some of my favorite people. And I just got to know them because I called on them. They were on my route. And I said, you know what, let me go in and see. And I don't know if he's still buying from Gordon's or not, but he did with us for a while. And he is like, they are phenomenal people. Unless I go in, that's the biggest thing when you're chasing your dream, is if you don't take that first step and go in that direction, if you don't walk in that door will never open. You don't know. You talk about opening doors, but if I don't attempt to go in that door, it'll never open.
Nope.
Yeah. Yep. And the relationships you get out of it is phenomenal. Look, we're getting close to the end. The last thing, the way I always like to end my show is like being around as many young people as have all my life. What advice would you give to this younger generation to help develop and the importance of trust and clarity within their lives?
Yeah. I mean, so I think it all comes down to like, clearly I'm all about relationships. Everything I do is about relationships, and we talk about trust. We talk about all this. Clearly that's, for me, number one thing, right? You got great relationships, then, all the rest it's about, it's more about just talking amongst friends, right? How you can work together and build something special together. I mean, rarely a message goes out that I'm sending out to a prospective, let's say, customer on behalf of my client, that I don't talk about building something special with them.
Right.
That's, for me, what it's all about. And, and I want them to know that with respect to like the youth and the young and such. And, of course, first and foremost, they have to get on the right track, right? They've, clearly they gotta, in an ideal world, they're doing well in school, or at the very least, they're really putting hard work in, towards whatever it is they want to go for. But I would say, at least in my experience, personal experience, there is no substitute for like putting the effort in. I see that on a daily basis. If I'm doing my outreach, if I'm knocking on doors, if I'm like, the more I do that, I assure you, I am getting more high quality meetings. When the meetings stop, it's a result of me not having done that stuff. And so it's a metaphor for what you're basically asking about, right?
Yes.
When it comes to the young people, they need whatever it is they want to do. They got to set their mind to that and really do the things that's going to get them there.
Yeah.
They can do other fun things too, but they must keep on that, because if they're doing all these other things that are not going to get them where they need to go, they'll never get there.
Yeah. And there's so many distractions for them. It's easy to get distracted. And I'll, to kind of tag onto that, I love the fact that you have to stay focused and you just go. And even if you don't get to where you want to be, you might get to that curve in the road or that right turn that takes you to where you're supposed to be. So start going and follow that path. But the hard work and the effort you mentioned, you have to go. You have to have that purpose and you have to drive.
One other thing I would just very quickly mention too as well is just also, being intentional.
Yes.
It's another important thing. So like, for example, and being open to other things that may come their way, because I think it's especially as you learn, as you go, you listen, but being intentional. So like, for example, right now I've got so much like daily, right, that I've got to be thinking about, I've got to be doing on behalf of my clients.
Right.
But I still try to be very intentional about carving out a few half hours a week where I can meet with maybe new prospective clients, because at some point I may want to, like, if they're on board and I'm on board, I may want to take on a new client at some point, right?
Absolutely.
So you got to, kind of be intentional about doing that, because if you're not, what you may find out is at some point a couple of your clients go away, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, crap, I need to figure out, who am I gonna,
And I don't have anything in the pipeline.
So you also kind of need to be like, it just intent, and it's not specific to what I'm doing, but definitely it is what I'm doing. But also just in life, being, intentional about things is really important. We talked earlier, Bryan, about being lethal with your time.
Yes.
And again, I want to give Rogers Healy a shout out on that one, because that's his specific terms. But I got to tell you, it's something that you and I both said we need to do better at, because you just have a limited amount of time each day, and you really need to because there's going to be a lot of people that want to meet with you, that want your help with this, that want this, want that. You, of course, naturally, if you're a good person, you want to help, but you just got to be really careful, where you're spending your time. It's
funny because two of my goals are prioritize better and say no. I have sucked over the past my life, basically, of saying no at the times where, because you see the potential. And you see, and you want to experience that. And once you get in, sometimes it's hard to say, no, I need to stop here. I'm done. But that's one of the things you talk about, being intentional. Saying no sometimes and saying yes is intentional. Be intentional when you say it. Don't just say it just to say it.
Yeah.
That's huge. Look, Richard, thanks, man. It's been a great show. You're going to be able to see this again on LinkedIn, YouTube, and I'll put it on Spotify when we're done. Please share anything with the audience on how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, just look me up on LinkedIn. I recently removed some old connections that I just haven't worked with or done anything with, and I think that they simply are not really active on LinkedIn at all. So I probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 spots. So at the moment that I can add new people. So feel free to reach out and so forth. And if I can ever help in any way, obviously shoot me a message, and if I'm able to, I'm able to. And and such as well. So
no, love that. And look, I'm excited that I'm still connected to you on LinkedIn. So thank you.
Bryan, thanks for this though, Bryan. It's really been fun. Always awesome connecting with you, man. And I love my friends. I try to help my friends however I can. And it's just good karma, right? Everybody, if we can help each other with things like this, and you know, and hey, man, it's right. There's something in it for me as
Yes.
well, right? I mean, I get motivated. I'm able to put my stuff out there in the universe. It's really good for everybody.
Yeah, no, love it. Look, let's go and make an impact in our lives and our community through trust, clarity, and traction. Let's be transitional over transactional. You can find me on LinkedIn and stay connected for future episodes and a deeper conversation with Richard. Take a listen to this. Find him, find my friend, connect with him if you can. Find one of the 20 spots, or at least send him a message. Join me next week when we have an interesting conversation with podcasting and relationship building. My guest will be Greg Wasserman, another amazing background in business and podcasting. Have a fantastic week. Go Texans and enjoy your family, please. See you.
Take care, buddy.